everyone, welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, you're about to dive into 3 hours of raw, unfiltered thoughts about life, memory, and connection. So smash that like button and subscribe because we're going deep tonight. So I was sitting in my car the other day, just parked in some random parking lot after work, and I had this moment where I looked at my hands on the steering wheel and thought, when did I become the person who sits in parking lots just to delay going home? Not because home is bad, but because I needed those 7 minutes of absolute nothing. And it hit me that maybe we're all just collecting these tiny moments of pause in between the chaos we call living. You know what's wild? We spend so much time talking about big life events, the graduations, the weddings, the promotions, but nobody really talks about the Tuesday afternoon when you're microwaving leftovers and suddenly remember something your friend said 3 years ago that you didn't understand them but makes perfect sense now. And that's the stuff that actually shapes us. Those random flashes of clarity that come out of nowhere. I think about how we're all walking around with these entire universes in our heads. Like every person you pass on the street has their own soundtrack playing. Their own worries about that text they sent 2 hours ago. Their own relief that nobody noticed they wore the same shirt twice this week. And we're all just pretending we have it together, when really we're all equally confused about what we're supposed to be doing with our lives. There's something beautiful about late night drives when the roads are empty and you can actually hear yourself think, when the street lights blur past and you're suspended in this moment between where you were and where you're going. And sometimes I think that's the only time we're truly honest with ourselves, when there's nobody watching and nothing to prove. I've been thinking a lot about how we romanticize the past, like I'll remember being 16 and thinking life was so hard because I had homework and drama with friends. But now I'd give anything to have those be my biggest problems. Except when I was 16 I thought the same thing about being 12. So maybe we're just always convinced that some other time was easier. Some other version of ourselves had it figured out. The truth is nobody has it figured out. Your parents are making it up as they go. Your boss is Googling half the stuff they're supposed to know. That confident person you follow on social media has anxiety attacks in grocery stores. We're all just doing our best impression of competent adults while internally screaming at least once a day. And isn't it comforting in a way, knowing that we're all equally lost, that the person who looks like they have their entire life planned out is probably lying awake at 3 a.m, wondering if they made the right choice, if they should have taken that other job, dated that other person, moved to that other city. I read somewhere that the average person has about 60,000 thoughts per day, and most of them are the same thoughts they had yesterday, which explains why we get stuck in these loops, why we keep replaying the same conversations, rehearsing arguments that will never happen, planning futures that might never exist. Sometimes I catch myself living in hypotheticals like, what if I had said yes instead of no? What if I had turned left instead of right? What if I had been brave instead of safe? And it's exhausting carrying around all these alternate versions of your life that only exist in your head. But here's the thing about regret that nobody tells you. write it without any of the messy, complicated parts that actually come with real decisions. I think we're all just trying to write a story about ourselves that makes sense, that has a clear beginning and middle and some kind of direction toward an ending. But life doesn't work like that. Life is more like a series of random scenes that you later try to connect with meaning, like you're editing a movie in reverse and hoping the footage you shot actually adds up to something coherent. You ever notice how you can be in a room full of people and still feel completely alone, or how you can be physically alone but feel completely connected to everyone? Like loneliness isn't really about proximity, it's about whether you feel seen, whether someone out there understands the specific weird way your brain works. And maybe that's why we're all online so much, why we're scrolling at 2 a.m. looking for that one comment that says me too, looking for proof that someone else out there gets it, that our strange internal experiences aren't actually that strange, that we're not broken, just human. I've been noticing how much of life is just maintenance, like you clean your room and a week later it's messy again. You do laundry and immediately start creating more dirty clothes. You go to sleep and wake up tired. You eat and get hungry again. And somewhere in all this maintenance, we're supposed to also be building a meaningful existence, creating memories, becoming the person we want to be. Sometimes I think about how many versions of myself have existed. There's the child me who thought being a teenager would solve everything. The teenage me who thought being an adult would solve everything. The early 20s me who was so confident about things I'm now uncertain about. And future me is probably looking back at current me thinking, wow, I really didn't understand anything yet. The weird part is they're all still in here somehow. Like I can still access the feeling of being 7 years old and believing in magic, or being 17 and thinking heartbreak was the end of the world. And maybe that's what makes us human. This accumulation of all our past selves layered on top of each other like transparent overlays that all add up to whoever we are right now. I wonder sometimes if other people's internal monologue is as chaotic as mine. Like, are you also constantly having multiple thoughts at once, having a conversation while simultaneously remembering something embarrassing from 5th grade, while also making a mental grocery list, while also wondering if you locked the door this morning? Or is everyone else walking around with this peaceful, quiet mind and I just got the demo version with all the extra features nobody asked for? There's this concept in physics about how you can't observe something without changing it, and I think that applies to life too. Like, the moment you start paying attention to your breathing, you breathe differently. The moment you think about how you're standing, you stand weird. The moment you become conscious of existing, you're not just existing anymore, you're performing existing, and it's exhausting. Sometimes I miss being a kid and just being, like, kids don't sit around wondering if they're doing childhood right. They just do it. They cry when they're sad and laugh when something's funny, and they don't have this whole layer of self-awareness that makes everything complicated. But then again, maybe that's what growing up is, accumulating layers of self-awareness until you're so aware of yourself that you forget how to just be. And maybe wisdom is somehow unlearning all that and getting back to just existing without the constant commentary. death sometimes, not in a dark way, just in a this is happening to all of us way, and how wild it is that we all know it's coming, but we still stress about whether someone liked our text message, still care about winning arguments, still hold grudges over things that won't matter in 5 years, let alone 50. If we really internalized our own mortality, would we live differently, or would the weight of that awareness crush us? Is denial actually a gift that lets us care about small things, lets us get invested in TV shows and sports teams, and whether that person from high school thinks we're successful? There's something profound about how we're all just temporary arrangements of atoms that somehow became conscious enough to wonder about being temporary arrangements of atoms, like the universe figured out a way to look at itself, and we're just along for the ride, trying to make sense of it with our limited perspective and even more limited time. I read once that we're all made of stardust, that every atom in our bodies was forged in the heart of a dying star billions of years ago, and I can't decide if that makes life more meaningful or less. Like, are we special because we're the universe experiencing itself, or are we just recycled material that temporarily thinks it's special? Maybe it's both. Maybe the meaning is in the temporary part, in the fact that this specific arrangement of atoms that thinks it's you will never exist again. These exact thoughts in this exact moment are happening once and only once in all of time and space. You know what I think about a lot? How many people I've met and forgotten. How many conversations I've had that meant nothing to me but maybe change someone else's day. How many times I've been an extra in someone else's story. Just the cashier they barely looked at, or the person who held the door, or the stranger on the train they made eye contact with for half a second. We're all simultaneously the main character of our own story and a background character in thousands of other stories, and most of the time we'll never know which moments mattered, which casual interactions rippled out into something bigger in someone else's life. I sometimes wonder about the parallel lives I'm not living. Like in another reality, I made different choices, and I'm a completely different person having completely different thoughts, and maybe there's infinite versions of me scattered across infinite universes, some happy, some sad, some successful by society standards, some successful by their own standards. And this version of me is just the one that happened to end up here talking to you right now. Isn't it strange how we put so much pressure on decisions, like we have to choose the right college, or the right job, or the right person, but actually we're just choosing one path out of infinite possible paths, and none of them are really right or wrong. They just are. They just lead to different versions of our life, and different things to worry about at 3 a.m. Sometimes I think the whole concept of having your life together is a myth we all agree to believe in because the alternative is too scary. Like nobody actually has it together. We're all just at different stages of falling apart and putting ourselves back together, and pretending the cycle isn't obvious to everyone around us. And maybe that's okay. Maybe life isn't supposed to be this stable, fixed thing. Maybe it's supposed to be messy and confusing and constantly shifting. And our job isn't to figure it all out, but to just keep showing up anyway. Keep trying even when we don't know what we're trying for. I've been thinking about how we measure success. like society says it's money and status and achievements, but then you meet people who have all that and they're miserable, and you meet people who have none of it and they're genuinely happy. So clearly we're measuring wrong. Clearly there's something else that matters more that we can't quite articulate or quantify. Maybe it's connection. Maybe it's feeling like you matter to someone. Maybe it's having something you care about that's bigger than yourself. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's just moments, just the feeling of sun on your face, or laughing until your stomach hurts, or that perfect song that comes on at the perfect time. We spend so much time chasing future happiness, like I'll be happy when I graduate, when I get that job, when I meet that person, when I lose that weight, when I make that money, and then those things happen and we just create new conditions for future happiness, and we never actually arrive at happy. We're always en route to happy, always preparing for happy, never actually being happy right now in this moment, which is the only moment we actually have. And I know that sounds like generic advice you'd see on an inspirational poster, but it's true. Like, genuinely think about it. How much of your life do you spend actually present versus planning or remembering or worrying about things that haven't happened yet or things you can't change? We're time travelers living everywhere except now, and now is where life is actually happening. Everything else is just stories we tell ourselves about life. You ever have those moments where you suddenly become aware of your own existence, like you look at your hands and think, holy shit, these are my hands, I'm controlling these hands, I'm inside this body, looking out at the world through these specific eyes, and for a second it's absolutely wild that you're you and not someone else. And then the moment passes and you go back to just being you without thinking about it, back to the autopilot that gets us through most of our days. Because if we were constantly aware of the absurdity of existence, we'd never get anything done. I think about how much of communication is subtext, like we say I'm fine when we mean I'm falling apart. We say we should hang out sometime when we mean probably never. We say it's okay when we mean it's not okay, but I don't want to talk about it. And somehow we all understand this coded language. We all know what people really mean versus what they actually say, except when we don't, and then everything gets weird and complicated, and someone's feelings get hurt over a misunderstood text message. Technology was supposed to make communication easier, but somehow it made it harder. Like now we have to interpret not just what people say, but how quickly they respond, what emoji they use, whether they use punctuation or not, and we've created all these new ways to overthink every interaction, new ways to convince ourselves someone is mad at us, or losing interest, or secretly hating us, based on microscopic changes in their texting patterns. And don't even get me started on social media, like we're all performing these edited versions of our lives for each other, posting the highlights and hiding the boring parts, and then we compare our behind the scenes to everyone else's show reel and wonder why we feel inadequate. Why it seems like everyone else is living this amazing life while we're just existing, forgetting that they're all doing the same thing, all showing the sunset but not the argument they had right before taking the photo. I wonder what aliens would think if they observed us, like here's this species that figured out how to split atoms and send information they're simultaneously capable of incredible beauty and terrible destruction. Maybe that's the human condition, though. Maybe we're supposed to be contradictory, supposed to contain multitudes, supposed to be capable of both selflessness and selfishness, both love and hate, both wisdom and stupidity. And maybe the goal isn't to resolve the contradiction, but to embrace it, to accept that we're complicated, messy beings, doing our best in a complicated, messy world. Sometimes I think about legacy, like what mark are we leaving? Will anyone remember us in 100 years? Does it matter if they do? Most people throughout history have been forgotten, their names lost, their stories untold. They lived entire lives full of joy and pain and everything in between. And now there's no trace they ever existed, and that's going to be most of us too. Even the people we think are important now will eventually fade into obscurity. So maybe the point isn't to be remembered, but to matter while we're here, to make the people around us feel loved, to leave things slightly better than we found them, even if nobody credits us for it. I've noticed how we're all carrying around these invisible wounds, these things that happened to us that shaped how we see the world, and we don't wear signs explaining why we are the way we are, why we flinch at certain things or light up at others, why we have weird boundaries or strange habits. We're all just assuming everyone else had a normal childhood, and we're the only ones with baggage, when actually we're all traumatized in different ways by the simple act of being alive and growing up and learning that the world isn't what we thought it was. And maybe that's why kindness matters so much, because you never know what someone is carrying. You never know if your small gesture of patience or understanding is the thing that keeps them going today. You never know when you're being someone's proof that people can be good, that the world isn't entirely terrible, that there's still hope. I think hope is underrated, like we're all trying to be realistic and practical and not get our hopes up. But hope is the thing that keeps us going. Hope that tomorrow might be better. Hope that we're growing even when it doesn't feel like it. Hope that all this struggling and trying and failing and getting back up actually adds up to something meaningful in the end. And even if it doesn't, even if there's no grand purpose and we're just here by accident and none of it means anything cosmically speaking, we can still create meaning. We can still decide what matters to us. We can still love people and make art and help others and find joy in small things. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything. You know what's funny? How we spend our whole lives trying to be someone, trying to become this idealized version of ourselves, and then you meet older people and they tell you they're still figuring it out, they're still changing, they're still discovering new things about themselves, and you realized, oh, we never actually arrive at being done, being complete. We're always in process, always becoming, and maybe that's the point. Maybe the journey actually is the destination, as cliche as that sounds. I've been thinking about how relationships shape us, like we're different versions of ourselves with different people. We emphasize different aspects of our personality. We're shaped by how others see us and how we want to be seen, and sometimes I wonder which version is the real me, or if they're all equally real, if we're just multifaceted beings that can't be reduced to one consistent personality. And friendships are weird too, like you can know someone for years and still not really know them. You can share space without sharing selves, Or you can meet someone and immediately feel like you've known them forever. Feel like you can skip all the small talk and just get to the real stuff, and there's no formula for it, no way to predict which connections will stick and which will fade. You just have to keep putting yourself out there and hoping. I think about how much of life is just showing up, like half of success is just being there consistently, doing the thing even when you don't want to, especially when you don't want to, because motivation is fleeting, but discipline is what actually builds things, creates change, moves you forward even when it's boring or hard or you'd rather be doing anything else. But also there's something to be said for rest, for knowing when to push and when to stop pushing, for understanding that you're not a machine. You can't optimize yourself into perfection. Sometimes you need to just exist without producing, without achieving, without justifying your existence through productivity. We've created this culture where being busy is a badge of honor, where rest feels like laziness, where we're all running ourselves into the ground, trying to do everything and be everything, and then wondering why we're exhausted, why nothing feels meaningful anymore, when we're too tired to actually experience any of it. And I get it, I fall into the same trap. I fill every moment with something. I can't even eat a meal without watching something or scrolling something. I've forgotten how to just be with my own thoughts, how to be bored without immediately reaching for stimulation. And maybe that's why these quiet moments feel so necessary now. These moments where it's just me and my thoughts and no distractions, even though it's uncomfortable, especially because it's uncomfortable. You know what I miss? Having nothing to do, like actually nothing, no obligations, no phone to check, no knowledge of what everyone else is doing, just empty time to fill however you wanted. And remember how as kids we'd complain about being bored like it was the worst thing ever, but now being bored sounds like a luxury, sounds like having enough space in your life to actually feel something other than overwhelm. I wonder if we'll look back on this era and think, wow, we really did that wrong. Wow, we really let technology take over our lives. Wow, we really forgot how to be present with each other. Or if this is just how it is now, if we've permanently changed what it means to be human, what it means to connect, what it means to think. And maybe every generation thinks the new technology is ruining everything. Maybe our grandparents said the same thing about television. Maybe their grandparents said it about radio. Maybe this is just what progress feels like, uncomfortable and disorienting and possibly destructive, but also full of new possibilities we can't even imagine yet. I've been noticing how we're all performing all the time, like you're at the grocery store and you're not just shopping. You're being watched by other people shopping, so you're performing shopping. You're aware of your facial expressions, your body language, whether you look weird standing in front of the yogurt section too long, trying to decide between brands. And it's exhausting. Like, can we just exist without being perceived? Can we just do things without worrying about how it looks to the invisible audience we're always playing to? And then you have actual audiences online where everything you say is permanent and public and can be taken out of context, where you're supposed to have opinions about everything, and those opinions better be correct, or you're getting cancelled, where you can't just be a person figuring things out. You have to be a brand message, a carefully curated version of yourself that never contradicts itself or shows uncertainty or admits to changing their mind. I think we're all just trying to find our people, trying to find the ones who get us without explanation, who we can be weird around without judgment, who make life feel less lonely, less confusing, less hard. And when you find those people, you hold on to them because they're rare, because most connections are surface level, because it's scary to really let someone in, to show them the messy parts, the parts you're ashamed of, the parts you're still figuring out. And sometimes you lose those people, not because anyone did anything wrong, but because people change, grow apart, want different things, and that's one of the hardest parts of being human. Letting go of people who shaped you, who knew versions of you that don't exist anymore. Carrying the memory of who you were together while accepting that chapter is over. I think about memory a lot, how unreliable it is, how we remember things wrong, how we fill in gaps with things that never happened, how every time we remember something we're actually remembering the last time we remembered it. So our memories are copies getting more distorted with each recall, and that means nothing we remember is quite true. We're all just telling ourselves stories about our past and believing them, and maybe that's okay. Maybe the story is more important than the accuracy, and maybe we need to shape our past into something we can live with. And the things we remember versus the thing we forget are interesting too, like why do I remember random dialogue from a conversation 12 years ago, but I can't remember what I ate for breakfast yesterday? Why do embarrassing moments stay vivid forever while happy moments fade? Why does trauma etch itself so deep while joy seems so fleeting? Maybe it's survival. Maybe our brains prioritize remembering threats, remembering pain, remembering what to avoid, and happiness doesn't need to be remembered to be valuable. It just needs to be felt in the moment it's happening. Sometimes I think we're all just looking for permission to feel how we feel, to want what we want, to be who we are. And we look for it in other people, in validation, in likes and comments and approval, when really the only permission we need is our own. But that's the hardest one to give ourselves, because we've internalized so many voices telling us we're wrong. We're too much. We're not enough. We're doing it all wrong. And maybe growing up is learning to trust yourself, learning that you actually do know what's right for you, even when it doesn't match what's right for someone else, learning that you can disappoint people and survive it, that you can make the wrong choice and course correct, that you're allowed to change your mind, to not know, to still be figuring it out even when you thought you'd have it figured out by now. I've been thinking about how we're all just trying to feel something, like we watch sad movies to cry, we watch scary movies to feel afraid, we ride roller coasters to feel that drop in our stomach, we fall in love to feel alive, we take risks to feel like we're really living, and maybe that's what life is, just the pursuit of feeling, of experience, of knowing we're here, we're real, we matter, even if it's just to ourselves. And pain is part of that. Like we can't selectively numb. If we numb the bad feelings, we numb the good ones too. If we avoid all discomfort, we avoid growth. If we never let ourselves be sad, we never really let ourselves be happy either. It's all connected, all part of being fully alive instead of just existing. You know what's weird about getting older? basically the same as I did at 15, just with more information and responsibilities. But that core sense of self hasn't changed that much. I'm still me, still figuring things out, still feeling like I'm faking it half the time, and then I interact with actual teenagers and realize, oh, I definitely got older somehow. I definitely changed in ways I can't see from inside myself. And time does this weird thing where it speeds up like you blink and it's been 5 years. You turn around and everyone you knew is married or having kids or building careers, and you're trying to figure out where the time went, how it's possible that this is your life now. This is who you are. These are your choices and their consequences. This is real and permanent and no longer theoretical. I think about choices a lot, about the weight we give them, like we act like every choice is life or death, when really most choices don't matter as much as we think they do. Most paths lead somewhere interesting. Most mistakes are survivable. Most regrets fade with time. And the things we thought would ruin us usually just become funny stories we tell later about how dramatic we used to be. But then some choices really do matter, really do change everything, and you usually don't know which is which until later, until you can see how it all unfolded, and by then it's too late to choose differently. You just have to live with it, make peace with it, find the good in whatever path you ended up on. Sometimes I wonder if free will is real, or if we're all just following our programming, executing the code written by our genetics and our experiences, making choices that feel free but are actually predictable based on who we are and how we were shaped. And if that's true, does it even matter? Does it change anything about how we live? Or is the illusion of choice enough? Is the feeling of agency enough, even if it's technically not real? These are the kinds of questions that don't have answers, but we ask them anyway, because we're humans, and that's what we do. We question, we wonder, we try to understand, even when understanding is impossible, even when the mystery is the point. I've been noticing how much of life is just maintenance. Like you build something, and then you have to maintain it. You create a habit, and then you have to keep it. You start a relationship, and then you have to nurture it. Nothing just stays good on its own. Everything requires continued effort, and that's exhausting, but also beautiful in a way, like the effort is how you show you care. The maintenance is the love. And maybe that applies to ourselves too, like we're not fixed objects, we're ongoing projects. We need maintenance, we need check-ins with ourselves, we need to adjust and recalibrate and forgive ourselves when we fall apart a little, when we skip the maintenance and let things pile up until we're overwhelmed, and then we have to do the work of putting ourselves back together. And that's okay. That's part of the process. That's being human. You know what I appreciate? People who admit they don't know. People who can say, I'm not sure, instead of pretending. People who can be wrong and learn and change their mind. People who don't have to be the smartest person in the room. Who can ask questions without feeling stupid. Who can show vulnerability without falling apart. I think strength is overrated and vulnerability is underrated. Like real strength is admitting weakness. Real courage is being scared and doing it anyway. Real confidence is knowing you don't know everything and being okay with that. And I wish we taught that more. I wish we made space for not knowing, for uncertainty, for being in progress, instead of pretending everyone has to have all the answers all the time, has to be confident and sure and never doubt themselves when really doubt is healthy. Uncertainty is normal. Questions are more useful than answers sometimes. So here we are, 3 hours later, still rambling, still thinking out loud, still trying to make sense of this weird, beautiful, complicated, messy experience called being alive. And maybe that's all any of us can do. Just keep processing, keep feeling, keep connecting, keep trying, keep showing up, even when we don't have it figured out, especially when we don't have it figured out, because that's what makes us human, that's what makes us real, and maybe that's enough, maybe we're enough, maybe this is enough right now, exactly as it is, exactly as we are. And if you made it this far, thank you for listening, thank you for being here, thank you for existing in the same moment as me, and remember, you're not alone in feeling lost sometimes. We're all figuring it out together, one day at a time, one moment at a time, one breath at a time. And you know what's strange about that last thought, about taking it one breath at a time, is that breathing is the one thing we do constantly without thinking about it until someone mentions it, and then suddenly you're aware of every breath, and it feels manual and weird, like your body forgot how to do it automatically. And that's kind of like consciousness itself, like we're just living until we start thinking about living. And then it gets complicated and self-referential, and suddenly you're not just alive, you're aware of being alive, aware of being aware, and it's this infinite loop that you can't escape once you notice it. I've been thinking about how we're all carrying these invisible loads, like everyone you see is dealing with something, fighting battles you know nothing about, and we walk past each other every day completely unaware of the weight other people are carrying, the grief, the anxiety, the chronic pain, the financial stress, the relationship problems, the existential dread, and we judge them for being slow or distracted or rude, when really they're just trying to survive their own life while we're trying to survive ours. And social media makes this worse because we only see the curated version, we see the vacation photos but not the credit card debt. We see the happy couple but not the argument they had in the car on the way to take the photo. We see the promotion but not the panic attacks. We see success but not the cost of that success. And then we compare our full reality to their edited highlights and feel like we're failing, when actually we're just seeing different parts of the same complicated human experience. Sometimes I think about how much energy we spend trying to control things we can't control. Like we worry about what people think of us, but we can't control their thoughts. We stress about the future, but we can't predict it. We ruminate about the past, but we can't change it. And all that energy could be going toward the things we can actually influence, the choices we make today, the actions we take right now, the way we respond to circumstances, even if we can't control the circumstances themselves. But knowing that and actually doing it are two different things. Like, I know I shouldn't worry about things outside my control, but I do it anyway. I know I should be present, but I'm constantly somewhere else. Mentally, I know I should be kinder to myself, but the voice in my head is my harshest critic. And that gap between knowing and doing is where most of us live, in the space between who we want to be and who we actually are. I wonder if anyone actually feels like an adult, or if we're all just pretending, like I pay bills and have responsibilities and make decisions that affect my life. adult to show up and tell me what to do, and then I remember I am the real adult, and that's terrifying, because who thought it was a good idea to put me in charge of anything? And you see your parents or older people and realize they feel the same way. They're also making it up. They're also unsure. They just got better at hiding it, or accepted that nobody actually knows what they're doing. And that's normal. There's something freeing about accepting that, though, about releasing the expectation that you're supposed to have it all figured out, that there's some magical age where everything clicks into place and you suddenly understand life, because that age doesn't exist. People die still figuring things out, still growing, still changing, and maybe that's beautiful. Maybe the journey never ends. Maybe we're always becoming until we stop. I've been noticing how much of happiness is just not being in pain, like when your headache finally goes away, or your stomach settles after being sick, or you finally get comfortable after a long day, and that relief feels like joy. That absence of discomfort feels like success, and it makes me think, maybe we've got it backwards. Maybe happiness isn't this thing we achieve by adding more to our lives. Maybe it's what's left when we remove the things that hurt. And so much of what hurts is in our heads, the stories we tell ourselves about not being good enough, about being behind, about missing out, about failing. And those stories feel true, but they're just stories, just narratives we've constructed from selective evidence and biased interpretation. And we could tell ourselves different stories if we wanted to. We could focus on the evidence that we're doing okay, that we're trying, that we're growing, even when it doesn't feel like it. But our brains have this negativity bias. They're wired to focus on threats and problems, because that's what kept our ancestors alive. But now we're not being chased by predators. We're just being chased by our own thoughts, by deadlines and expectations and social pressures, and our ancient brains are treating all of it like life or death situations, when most of it really isn't. Like that email you're scared to send, that conversation you're avoiding, that thing you're procrastinating on. None of it is actually dangerous, but your body responds like it is, gives you the same stress response as if you were facing actual physical danger. And no wonder we're all exhausted. We're constantly in fight or flight mode over things that can't actually hurt us. And then we develop all these coping mechanisms, some healthy, some not, some that help in the short term but hurt in the long term, and we get stuck in patterns, in cycles, in habits that don't serve us but feel safe because they're familiar. And breaking out of those patterns requires so much energy, so much conscious effort, that sometimes it feels easier to just stay stuck, to keep doing the thing that makes you miserable, because at least you know what to expect. I think about how much of life is just choosing between different kinds of hard, like staying is hard, but leaving is hard, speaking up is hard, but staying silent is hard, trying is hard, but giving up is hard. And there's no option that avoids difficulty. There's just choosing which difficulty you can live with, which pain leads somewhere you want to go versus pain that keeps you stuck. And relationships are all about this too. Like every relationship requires work, requires choosing someone over and over, requires navigating conflict and disappointment and changing needs. And we have this fantasy that the right person will be easy, but actually the right person is just the one worth doing the hard stuff for, the one where the work feels meaningful instead of draining. I've been thinking about love and how complicated it is, how it's not just one feeling but this whole complex mix of emotions that changes over time. Like the butterflies fade, but hopefully something deeper grows, something more stable, more real, more based on actually knowing someone instead of just the idea of them. And knowing someone and really knowing them means seeing their flaws and loving them anyway, means accepting that they're going to disappoint you sometimes, means understanding that they're a whole separate person with their own needs and wants and issues, not just a supporting character in your story. And the same is true in reverse. Like, you're going to disappoint people, you're going to be difficult sometimes, you're going to have needs that conflict with theirs, and that's not failure. That's just the reality of two separate humans trying to build something together while also being individuals with their own separate lives. Sometimes I think we expect too much from relationships. We want one person to be everything, to be our best friend and our lover and our therapist and our cheerleader and our adventure partner and our comfort and our excitement. And that's a lot to ask of one person. Maybe too much. Maybe we need different people for different needs. Maybe it's okay to have a partner who's great at some things, but not everything, as long as the important things are there, whatever those important things are for you. And figuring out what's important to you is its own challenge, because we absorb so many messages about what should be important, what relationships should look like, what love should feel like, and sometimes those external expectations don't match what actually makes us happy, but we chase them anyway because we think we're supposed to want what everyone else wants. I wonder how many people are living lives they don't actually want because they never stop to ask what they really want. They just followed the script, did what was expected, checked the boxes, and then woke up one day and thought, is this it? Is this what I was working toward? And if so, why does it feel so empty? And it's scary to ask those questions because the answers might require change, might require admitting you've been going in the wrong direction, might require disappointing people, or starting over, or choosing uncertainty over security. And most of us aren't brave enough for that. Most of us just keep going, keep hoping it'll get better, keep waiting for some external thing to make us feel fulfilled, when really fulfillment has to come from inside, has to come from living in alignment with your actual values instead of inherited ones. But what are your actual values? Like, how do you separate what you really believe from what you were taught to believe? What you genuinely want from what you think you should want? Who you really are from who you've been performing being for so long that you forgot it was a performance? I think that's the work of a lifetime. That constant excavation of self, that peeling back layers of conditioning and expectation to find something real underneath, something authentic, something that feels like you, even if you can't quite articulate what you means. And that self isn't fixed either, like you're not discovering some essential, unchanging core. You're just finding out who you are right now, which is different from who you were 5 years ago, and different from who you'll be 5 years from now. And that's okay. That's growth. That's being alive. That's responding to experience and letting it change you, instead of staying rigid and breaking. I've noticed how much we resist change even when we say we want it. Like we want things to be different, but we also want them to stay the same. We want growth, but we're scared of what we'll lose. We want to move forward, but we're attached to the past. And we end up stuck in this liminal space, this in-between place, where we're not really here, but we're not really there either. And that uncertainty is uncomfortable, but also maybe necessary. Maybe transformation requires that period of not knowing, that time in the chrysalis where you're not who you were, but you're not yet who you're becoming. And during those times, everything feels wrong. Nothing fits anymore. Your old life doesn't work, but your new life hasn't formed yet. And you just have to trust that you're not falling apart. You're falling together in a new configuration. You're reorganizing at a deeper level, even though on the surface it looks like chaos. I think about how nature does this all the time, how trees lose their leaves and look dead, but they're just conserving energy for spring, how caterpillars dissolve into goo before becoming butterflies, how everything in nature has cycles of death and rebirth, contraction and expansion, and we're part of nature too. We have our seasons, our cycles, our times of going dormant, so we can grow later. But we live in a culture that only values the growth phase, the productivity, the constant upward trajectory, and we don't make space for rest, for processing, for the fallow periods that are necessary for sustained growth. And then we wonder why we're burnt out, why nothing feels meaningful, why we're going through the motions without any real engagement. And engagement is everything. Like you can have an objectively great life on paper and still be miserable if you're not actually present for it, if you're just checking boxes without feeling anything, if you've automated yourself so much that you've become a machine going through the motions of living without actually experiencing life. I think that's the real tragedy. Not death, but living without really living, existing without really experiencing, having all this potential for feeling and connection and growth, and just letting it atrophy because you're too busy, too distracted, too protected, too scared to really let life in with all its messiness and pain and beauty and joy. And joy is weird because it's often quiet, like we think happiness should be this big loud thing, but actually the best moments are often small, often simple, often just sitting with someone you love in comfortable silence, or noticing something beautiful you would have missed if you were rushing, or finally understanding something that was confusing you, or helping someone in a way that actually matters to them, or doing something just because you want to, with no other reason or justification needed. I've been trying to notice those moments more, trying to actually be present when they happen, instead of immediately thinking about the next thing, or photographing it for social media, or analysing whether I'm happy enough, just letting it be what it is, just experiencing it fully. And it's harder than it sounds because my brain is always somewhere else, always planning or reviewing or worrying, and being here now requires effort, requires intention, requires constantly bringing myself back to the present moment, like training a puppy that keeps wandering off. And sometimes the present moment sucks, like sometimes right now is painful or boring or difficult, and being present for that is even harder than being present for joy, but it's also necessary. Like, you can't selectively be present, you can't just show up for the good parts, you have to be willing to feel all of it, to stay with discomfort instead of immediately distracting yourself, to sit with difficulty emotions instead of numbing them. And that takes courage, more courage than we usually acknowledge. I think we don't give ourselves enough credit for just getting through things. Like we minimize our own struggles. We compare ourselves to people who have it worse and tell ourselves our problems don't matter. But pain isn't a competition. Your struggles are valid even if someone else's are worse. You're allowed to find things hard, even if they wouldn't be hard for someone else. You're allowed to need help, to not be okay, to take time to process and heal instead of just powering through and pretending you're fine. And pretending you're fine when you're not is exhausting. Like it takes so much energy to maintain that facade, to perform okayness, to hide the cracks, and for what? To make other people comfortable, to avoid vulnerability, to maintain some image of having it all together when literally everyone is struggling with something. Everyone is faking it to some degree. Everyone is one bad day away from falling apart. What if we just stopped pretending? What if we were honest about how hard it is sometimes? What if we admitted we need help? We're struggling, we don't know what we're doing. Would that be so terrible, or would it actually be a relief? Would it actually create more connection because people could relate to the truth instead of feeling inadequate comparing themselves to your lie? I've noticed how much shame we carry about being human, about having needs, having limits, having emotions. Like we think we should be logical robots who never get tired or sad or overwhelmed, and when we inevitably fail to be that. Because we're not robots. We're mammals with nervous systems and emotions and biological needs. We judge ourselves. We think there's something wrong with us. We try to fix ourselves when actually there's nothing to fix. We're just human. We're working as designed. Our emotions and limitations aren't bugs, they're features, and emotions are information. They're telling us something. Like anxiety is often telling us we need to prepare for something, or that we're not living in alignment with our values. Sadness is telling us we've lost something that mattered, or we need rest and processing. Anger is telling us a boundary has been crossed, or an injustice has occurred. And if we actually listened to our emotions instead of just trying to make them go away, if we got curious about what they're trying to tell us, we might actually learn something useful about ourselves and our needs. But we're taught to override our emotions, to push through, to not let feelings interfere with productivity. And we end up disconnected from ourselves, not knowing what we actually feel or need or want, because we've spent so long ignoring those signals, and then we wonder why we feel empty or numb, or like we're watching our life from outside ourselves instead of actually living it. I think dissociation is more common than we talk about. This feeling of not being fully in your body, not being fully present, watching yourself go through life like you're a character in a movie, and it's a coping mechanism. Is your brain protecting you from overwhelm by creating distance? But it also means you're not fully here, not fully alive, not accessing the full range of human experience because you're too defended, too protected, too scared to feel everything, because feeling everything includes feeling pain. And pain is inevitable. Like we spend so much energy trying to avoid it, but it finds us anyway. Loss finds us, disappointment finds us, heartbreak finds us, and all that energy we spent trying to avoid it could have gone toward building resilience, toward learning how to be with pain instead of running from it, toward understanding survive it, that it won't destroy us, that we're stronger than we think. And strength isn't about not feeling pain, it's about feeling it and continuing anyway. It's about breaking and putting yourself back together. It's about being vulnerable and staying open even after you've been hurt. It's about choosing to love even though loss is inevitable, choosing to try even though failure is possible, choosing to hope even though disappointment is likely, because the alternative is closing yourself off, protecting yourself so much that nothing can hurt you, but also nothing can reach you. And that's not safety, that's imprisonment. Sometimes I think about courage and how we misunderstand it, like we think it's not being afraid, but actually it's being afraid and doing it anyway. It's not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important than the fear, that growth or connection or truth or change or love or whatever matters, more than being comfortable, more than being safe, more than avoiding pain. And everyday courage is underrated, like we celebrate big dramatic acts of bravery. But what about the courage it takes to get out of bed when you're depressed? To try again after failing? To be honest about your needs? To leave a situation that's killing you slowly? To ask for help? To change your mind? To admit you were wrong? To keep going when you don't know if it'll work out? Those are the acts of courage that actually shape our lives, those daily decisions to choose growth over comfort, truth over ease, presence over numbing, connection over protection. I've been thinking about protection and how much of it is actually prison. Like we build these walls to keep pain out, but they also keep love out, they also keep growth out, they also keep life out, and we end up safe but alone, protected but stagnant, defended but disconnected. And at some point we have to ask if the cost of protection is worth what we're missing, if avoiding pain is worth also avoiding joy, if staying safe is worth staying small. And getting hurt is terrible, but it's also proof you're alive, proof you cared enough about something to let it matter, proof you were brave enough to be vulnerable. And the alternative is living this defended life where nothing gets in, but also nothing gets out, where you're so busy protecting yourself that you forget what you're protecting. You're so focused on survival that you forget to actually live. And living requires risk, requires uncertainty, requires putting yourself out there, knowing you might get rejected or hurt or disappointed, but also knowing that's the only way to actually connect, to actually experience, to actually have a life that feels real instead of just safe. I wonder what we'll regret more at the end, the things we did or the things we didn't do, the risks we took or the risks we avoided, the times we were brave or the times we played it safe. And I think most people regret the undone things, the unexpressed feelings, the unchosen paths, not because those paths would have definitely been better, but because we'll never know, because we chose certainty over possibility, and now we live with the ghost of what might have been. And maybe that's okay, maybe some amount of regret is inevitable, maybe we can't possibly do everything or be everything or experience everything, and the paths we didn't take are the price we pay for the path we did take. And all we can do is try to choose consciously, try to make decisions we can live with, try to align our choices with our values even when those values conflict, even when there's no good option, even when we're just choosing the least bad thing. Life is full of these impossible choices, these situations where perception has a cost, where you're not choosing between good and bad, but between different kinds of difficult, and nobody teaches you how to make those choices. Nobody gives you a formula. You just have to do your best with incomplete information and uncertain outcomes, and then live with the consequences. And sometimes the consequences are fine, and sometimes they're terrible, and sometimes you just don't know yet. You're still in the middle of the story, still living with the uncertainty. And uncertainty is the hardest part. Like, we want to know how things turn out. We want guarantees. We want to see the future so we can make the right choice now. But life doesn't work like that. We have to choose without knowing, commit without certainty, try without guarantees. And that's terrifying, but also kind of beautiful, because it means anything is possible. It means we're not locked into any one future. It means our choices actually matter. What we do actually shapes what happens next, even if we can't control exactly how. I think about control a lot, about how much we pretend we have, and how little we actually do. Like, we control our actions, but not their outcomes. We control our responses, but not what we're responding to. We control our effort, but not our results. And accepting that, really accepting the limits of control, is either liberating or terrifying, depending on the day, depending on how much security you need versus how much freedom you want. And security is mostly an illusion anyway. Like, we think we can make ourselves safe through planning and preparing and controlling, but actually everything can change in an instant. Nothing is guaranteed. The floor can drop out from under you at any moment, and you can either live in constant anxiety about that, or you can accept it, accept that life is fragile and temporary and uncertain and precious exactly because of those things, not in spite of them. Accepting mortality changes things, like when you really internalize that your time is limited, that everyone you love is going to die, that all of this is temporary. It makes the petty stuff feel petty, makes the important stuff feel more important, makes you want to say the things you're scared to say. Do the things you're scared to do. Love the people while you still can. Experience life fully instead of just moving through it. Half asleep, waiting for someday that might never come, and that someday thinking is dangerous because it lets us postpone everything. Lets us say, I'll be happy when, I'll start living when, I'll tell them when, and then years pass and we're still waiting for the perfect moment that doesn't exist, still preparing for a life we're not actually living, still rehearsing instead of performing. And one day we wake up and realize we spent our whole life getting ready to live instead of actually living. And that's heartbreaking. That's the real tragedy. Not that we died, but that we never really started. I've been noticing how much of my life happens in my head, like I'm constantly narrating my experience, constantly thinking about what just happened or what might happen next, and I'm missing what's actually happening right now because I'm too busy processing it, too busy turning it into a story instead of just experiencing it directly without the layer of commentary. And that commentary is exhausting. Like, my brain never shuts up. It's always analysing, always judging, always comparing, always planning, and I don't know how to turn it off. I don't know how to just be without the constant internal monologue. And meditation is supposed to help with that, but when I try to meditate, my brain just gets louder, just starts listing all the things I should be doing, instead of sitting here trying not to that's the point. Maybe it's not about stopping thoughts, but about noticing them and letting them pass instead of getting caught up in them. Not identifying with every random thing your brain produces, understanding that thoughts are just mental events, not truth, not commands, not identity, just temporary formations of neural activity that you can observe without believing or acting on. And that's hard because some thoughts feel so true, feel so much like reality, feel so much like you that questioning them feels like questioning your own existence. But actually, most of our thoughts are just habitual patterns, just stories we've told ourselves so many times. We forgot they were stories, and we could tell ourselves different stories. If we wanted to, we could question the narrative. We could look for evidence that contradicts our assumptions instead of just evidence that confirms them. I think about confirmation bias and how it shapes everything. Like once we believe something, we see evidence for it everywhere. We filter reality through our expectations and beliefs, and we end up living in this echo chamber of our own assumptions, never really seeing things as they are, but only as we expect them to be. And breaking out of that requires so much awareness, so much willingness to be wrong, so much humility to admit that maybe you don't see clearly, maybe your perspective is limited, maybe there's more to the situation than you're capable of perceiving from where you're standing. And we're all standing in different places, seeing from different angles, shaped by different experiences, and none of us has the full picture. We're all working with partial information and calling it truth. And maybe if we remembered that we'd be less certain, less dogmatic, less judgmental of people who see things differently, more curious about what they're seeing that we're not, more willing to update our beliefs when new information comes in, instead of defending our current beliefs like our life depends on them. But beliefs feel like identity, like if you're wrong about something fundamental, it means you don't know yourself. It means you've been living based on false premises. It means you have to question everything, and that's uncomfortable, that's destabilizing. It's easier to just double down, to defend, to rationalize, to find reasons why you're still right and everyone else is still wrong. And we all do this. We all protect our worldview even when it's not serving us, even when it's making us miserable, because at least it's familiar. At least we know how to operate within it. And change requires admitting we don't know, requires sitting with uncertainty, requires building a new framework from scratch. I wonder how many of my beliefs are actually mine versus just absorbed from my environment, like how much of what I think is really thinking versus just repeating what I've heard. How many of my opinions are really opinions versus just tribal markers, ways of signalling which group I belong to, which side I'm on, and if I really examined them honestly without caring about how it looked or who it would disappoint, would I still believe the same things? Or would I discover I've been performing beliefs I don't actually hold? And that's scary because beliefs give us community, give us identity, give us a sense of belonging, and questioning them risks losing all that, risks being cast out, risks standing alone. And humans are social creatures. We need belonging more than we need to be right. We'll distort our perception of reality to maintain our place in the tribe, because historically being cast out meant death. And even though that's not true anymore, our brains haven't caught up. Our nervous systems still So we conform, we pretend, we hide the parts of ourselves that don't fit, we perform the version of ourselves that we think will be accepted, and we lose ourselves in the process. We fragment ourselves into acceptable pieces and hide the rest, and then we wonder why we feel empty, why we feel fake, why nothing feels real, because we're not being real. We're being a carefully curated version designed to please others, to avoid rejection, to maintain belonging at the cost of authenticity. And authenticity is overused as a word, but underused as a practice. Like, everyone talks about being authentic, but actually doing it is terrifying. Actually showing people who you really are, what you really think, what you really feel, especially the parts you're ashamed of, the parts you judge, the parts you think make you unlovable. That takes more courage than most of us can muster most of the time. So we settle for performed authenticity. We show carefully selected vulnerable moments that make us look brave without actually risking much. We share struggles that are socially acceptable while hiding the ones that might actually get us rejected. I've been thinking about shame and how much power it has. How it's not just feeling bad about something you did, but feeling bad about who you are, feeling fundamentally flawed, fundamentally unworthy, fundamentally wrong. And shame thrives in darkness, thrives in secrecy, thrives in isolation. And the only way to dismantle it is to bring it into the light, to share it with someone who can hear it without judgment and reflect back that you're still worthy, you're still lovable, you're still human, and your worst moments don't define your entire existence. But finding those people is hard. Finding people who can hold space for your darkness without trying to fix it or minimize it or make it about them. People who can sit with your pain without needing to make it better. People who can love you in your messiness, not just in your highlights. And when you find those people, you hold on to them because they're rare. Because most people can only handle surface level connection, can only deal with you when you're easy and fun and entertaining. But real intimacy requires being willing to be difficult, to be needy, to be broken, to be all the things we're supposed to hide. And maybe that's what love really is. Not the romantic feeling, but the choice to stay when someone shows you their full self. To see someone completely and choose them anyway. To know their flaws and love them not in spite of those flaws, but as part of the whole complex package that makes them. Because people aren't puzzles where you remove the pieces you don't like. They're ecosystems where everything is connected, where the things you love about them are inseparable from the things you find difficult, where their strengths and weaknesses are two sides of the same trait. I think about how we're all just trying to matter, trying to feel like our existence makes us some kind of difference, like we're not just taking up space and resources and then dying without leaving any mark. And we look for that mattering in different places. Some people in their work, some in their relationships, some in their art, some in their service, some in their children, and maybe it doesn't matter where you find it as long as you find it somewhere, as long as you have something that makes you feel like you're contributing something, like you being here means something to someone. And meaning is subjective, like there's no objective purpose to life, no cosmic plan we're fulfilling, no external standard we're measured against, which is either depressing or liberating, depending on how you look at it. like either nothing matters, so why bother, or nothing matters, so you're free to decide what matters, free to create your own meaning, free to define success on your own terms instead of chasing someone else's definition. But we're so caught up in other people's definitions, so worried about measuring up to external standards, so focused on achieving things that look impressive from the outside, even if they feel empty from the inside. And we climb these ladders only to reach the top and realize we climbed the wrong ladder. We achieved the wrong goal. We won the wrong game. And now what? Now we start over. Now we admit we wasted years pursuing something we didn't actually want. Or do we just keep going? Keep pretending it's what we wanted? Keep trying to convince ourselves that the thing we have is the thing we wanted all along? I've noticed how much cognitive dissonance we can tolerate, how we can hold contradictory beliefs without noticing, how we can say one thing and do another and find ways to rationalize it, how we can know something intellectually without really believing it emotionally, and those gaps between knowing and believing, between believing and doing, between intention and action, those gaps are where we actually live, in the space between who we think we are and who we actually are, as evidenced by our behaviour. And our behaviour tells the truth. Like, you can say you value something, but if you don't spend time on it, don't invest energy in it, don't make choices that reflect it, then you don't actually value it. You just think you should value it, or you want to be the kind of person who values it. But your actual values are revealed by what you do when you're not thinking about it, by your default choices, by what you automatically prioritize when you can't do everything. So, if you want to know what you really value, don't listen to what you say. Look at how you spend your time. Look at where your energy goes. Look at what you make space for, and you might find that your actual priorities are different from your stated priorities. That there's a disconnect between your ideal self and your real self. And that disconnect is either something to work on or something to accept, depending on whether the gap bothers you enough to do the hard work of changing. And change is hard, like genuinely hard, not just uncomfortable, but requires sustained effort over time, requires failing and trying again, requires developing new habits while fighting old ones, requires patience with yourself while you're inconsistent, while you mess up, while you do the thing you said you weren't going to do anymore. And change doesn't happen in a straight line. It happens in spirals where you keep coming back to the same issues at different levels, where you think you've dealt with something and then it comes back in a new form, where healing isn't one moment but a continuous process. I think about healing and how it's not linear, how you can have good days and bad days, and that doesn't mean you're not making progress, how you can work on something for years and still get triggered, still fall into old patterns, still have to remind yourself of things you thought you'd already learned, and that's normal, that's part of being human. We're not machines that get fixed and stay fixed. We're dynamic systems that need continuous adjustment, continuous recalibration, continuous maintenance. And mental health is like physical health, like you don't just work out once and stay fit forever. You don't just eat one healthy meal and achieve wellness. You have to keep doing the things, keep showing up for yourself, keep choosing the harder thing that's actually better for you, over the easier thing that feels good in the moment but hurts later. And some days you have the energy for that, and some days you don't. And that's okay too. That's not failure. That's just being human with limited energy and competing priorities. I've been thinking about energy and how it's the real currency, like time management is actually energy management. Like, you can have all the time in the world, but if you don't have energy, it doesn't matter. And energy comes from so many sources, from sleep and food and movement and sunlight and connection and purpose and interest, and it's depleted by so many things, by stress and conflict and boredom and overwhelm and chronic pain and emotional labour, and we act like we should be able to do everything regardless of our energy level, like willpower should be infinite, like we can just push through, but actually we're working with limited resources, and we have to be strategic about how we spend them. And some things give energy while they take it, like exercise is hard but you feel better after. Creative work is exhausting but also energizing. Deep conversation takes effort but fills you up, while other things just drain without giving anything back, like scrolling social media or toxic relationships or jobs that crush your soul. And figuring out which is which, figuring out what actually nourishes you versus what just numbs you, that's crucial. That's how you build a life that's sustainable instead of slowly killing yourself trying to meet expectations that were never realistic. Sometimes I think we're all just tired, like collectively exhausted, burnt out from trying to do too much, be too much, keep up with too much, and we need permission to rest, permission to do less, permission to disappoint people, permission to have limits, permission to be human instead of superhuman, but we don't give ourselves that permission because rest feels like laziness, doing less feels like failure, having limits feels like weakness, and we push ourselves until we break and then wonder why we broke, like we didn't see it coming, like we didn't ignore every warning sign our body gave us. Our bodies are always communicating, always telling us what they need, but we're so disconnected from them, so used to overriding their signals, so trained to push through discomfort and ignore needs that we don't notice until things get really bad, until we can't ignore it anymore, until our body forces us to stop through illness or injury or complete collapse, and then we rest but we resent it. We treat it as an interruption instead of necessary information, instead of our body trying to protect us from ourselves. I wonder what it would be like to actually listen to our bodies, to honour their needs, to work with them instead of against them, to treat them as partners in this experience instead of machines we pilot, vehicles we use, objects we judge and try to control and get frustrated with when they don't perform the way we want. And the way we talk about bodies is so violent, like we battle our bodies, we fight fat, we wage war on aging, we punish ourselves with exercise, we restrict and deny and force, and it's all so adversarial, so disconnected, like our body is something separate from us that we have to dominate instead of something we are, something we live in and through, something that deserves care and respect and gentleness. And the beauty standards are impossible, like they're literally designed to be unattainable, so you keep buying products and services, trying to achieve them, and we know this intellectually, but we still internalize the messages, still judge ourselves, still feel like we're not enough, still think we'd be happy if we just looked different, weighed different. because of their kindness or humour, or the way they understand you, or the memories you share? And don't you find them beautiful because you love them, not the other way round? Doesn't love make people beautiful in your eyes, regardless of objective appearance? So why do we think we need to look a certain way to be worthy of love when that's not how we love others? When we extend grace and acceptance to everyone except ourselves, when we judge ourselves by standards we don't apply to anyone else, I think we're all so much harder on ourselves than we are on others, so much more critical, so much less forgiving, so much more demanding. And if we talked to our friends the way we talk to ourselves in our heads, we wouldn't have any friends. We'd be considered abusive, but somehow it's acceptable to be cruel to ourselves. Somehow that's normal. Somehow that's just what the internal voice sounds like for most people. And where did we learn that? Where did we pick up the idea that we need to be mean to ourselves to improve? That self-criticism is motivating? That we need to punish ourselves for mistakes, when actually research shows the opposite, shows that self-compassion is more effective than self-criticism, that treating yourself with kindness leads to better outcomes, that you can't hate yourself into a version of yourself you love. But knowing that and doing it are different things. Like, I know I should be kinder to myself, but the critical voice is automatic. It's been running for so long. It feels true, feels necessary. Feels like if I stopped criticizing myself, I'd become lazy or complacent, or stop trying, like the only thing keeping me functional is constant self-judgment, when actually the self-judgment is what's exhausting me, what's draining my energy, what's making everything harder than it needs to be. What if we tried something different? What if we experimented with self-compassion, with talking to ourselves like we'd talk to a good friend, with acknowledging that we're doing our best with what we have, that mistakes are part of learning, that being human means being imperfect, and that imperfection isn't something to fix but something to accept as part of the deal. And I know that sounds like giving up, like lowering standards, like accepting mediocrity, but actually accepting imperfection frees you to try harder, because you're not paralyzed by fear of failure. You're not avoiding challenges to protect your ego. You're not defining your worth by your performance. You can just try and learn and grow without so much riding on every outcome. I've been thinking about ego and how much of it is just fear. Like, the ego isn't some arrogant thing. It's a protection mechanism. It's trying to keep you safe from rejection and shame and feeling worthless. And when it gets defensive or prickly or needs to be right, it's not because you're a bad person. It's because some part of you feels threatened, feels like your worth is being questioned, feels like you need to prove something to exist, to matter, to be okay. And when you can see ego as fear instead of badness, you can have more compassion for it. You can notice when it's activated and ask what it's trying to protect you from. You can thank it for trying to help, while also recognizing that maybe the threat isn't as big as it feels. Maybe you can survive being wrong, being criticized, being imperfect. Maybe your worth isn't actually on the line, even though it feels like it is. But that requires developing a sense of worth that's independent of achievement. those messages start so young and run so deep that unlearning them feels impossible. Feels like trying to see air, trying to question the water you swim in.